Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 2025 Request for Application webinar with the Native American Agriculture Fund. We're thrilled to have you here today to talk about our organization and talk more in depth about our grant making process. Some housekeeping for today. We will go through a presentation at the top of the hour, but then we will allocate time towards the end of this webinar for you to ask questions. Our whole staff is available to answer those questions. So in order to submit those, you can submit them via the questions box in Zoom, or if you would like to reach out to one of our team members in the chat function, please feel free to also do that as well. We will do our best to answer all questions in the time allotted, but if we are not able to answer a question, we encourage you to include your contact information, maybe an email address so that we can reach back out to you following this webinar to best answer your questions. Also, please note that additional resources will be provided following this question and answer session for those that are not able to have their questions answered today. And this webinar will be recorded and posted to our website along with the slides.
Tilhast, hello. I'm Tony Stanger McLaughlin, CEO of the Native American Agriculture Fund. I'm calling in today from my homelands in eastern Washington state. I'm a citizen of the Colville Confederated Tribes. We are the largest Native American organization dedicated solely to serving Native American farmers and ranchers. Our eligible entities include CDFIs, educational organizations, our entities, nonprofits, and tribal governments, including state-recognized tribal governments. We are entering our sixth funding cycle in 2025, where we are happy to announce that we have distributed nearly $90 million in funding so far. There's a few changes to note in this year's application period that differ from previous years. One of those is in the area of compliance. You have to be in compliance in order to apply for this year's funding cycle. In addition, you are only eligible to apply for projects in length for 12 months or 24 months. And in those funding cycle years, you are only allocated one project modification and one budget modification annually. If you are applying for and receive both a youth grant and a general grant, each one of those is eligible for a modification per funding cycle year. Another change that we have is that we are embracing technology at NAAF. We have a chatbot that's going to be visible on our website that will help answer your questions on this year's application, as well as direct you to the correct person should the chatbot not be able to answer your specific question. We look forward to the 2025 funding class, and in order to assist you in understanding more about NAAF, we invite you to visit our website. Please look at our historical documents and look at our trust agreement in particular to understand where we can fund and if you're an eligible entity. In addition, we encourage you to look at previously funded projects to see if the work's already being done or there's potential for collaboration. We understand that this year, many of you are facing unprecedented funding decline as it relates to federal funding. We realize that you might need to reallocate funding in this year's funding cycle to be heavier in the salary section. That is fine as long as you let us know in the application the pivot in the salary adjustment as well as the justification and how you're working to make sure that your project can still be successful and sustainable. Remember that we cannot guess. We cannot give you the benefit of the doubt in the application. Everything has to be explicit in the application itself. That assists our board members in making decisions on the project's viability and, again, sustainability. We thank you for your continued dedication to Indian country agriculture, and we look forward to seeing this year's application, and we look forward to meeting the 2025 class grantees for the Native American Agriculture Fund. Lim, thank you.
Hello, everyone. And so next we're going to get into the details about our grant making process. But before we do, I wanted to review a little bit about our history and the context of the work that we do at the Native American Agriculture Fund. Our mission at NAAF is to support Native American farmers and ranchers for the advancement of agriculture through business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy services. NAAF is focused on healthy lands, healthy people, and healthy economies. We're ultimately investing in work to find solutions to the challenges that Native American farmers and ranchers face to increase access to capital for those producers. So to provide more historical context to our grant making, as it's embedded throughout our grant making process, I want to provide an overview of that history to help inform you the why behind our grant requirements and what we fund. In 1999, the Keepsake v. Vilsack class action lawsuit was filed to address long-standing challenges that Native American farmers and ranchers faced in accessing USDA loan programs and credit servicing. After more than a decade of litigation, the case was settled in 2010, leading to an establishment of a compensation fund, along with a debt relief and tax support and programmatic improvements at USDA. Through that structured claims process, more than 3,600 Native farmers and ranchers received compensation, as well as farm debt loan relief, and reinforcing the importance of ensuring access to agricultural lending for Native producers. As a part of that settlement, a cypre fund was created to support the long-term investment in Native agriculture. Following the further negotiations and a second round of compensation payments and tax relief that was distributed, $38 million in grants to nonprofits and other eligible organizations focused on strengthening Native agricultural enterprises were distributed, and those were referred to as the fast-track funding. In 2018, the court directed that the remaining funds be distributed through the Native American Agriculture Fund, which is our organization. It's important to know that our grant making is governed by a trust agreement. That trust agreement guides what we can fund. NAAF is tasked with deploying its resources over 20 years through grants that enhance the business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy services. We fund 501c3 organizations, educational institutions, community development financial institutions, or CDFIs, and tribal governments, ensuring that investments in Native agriculture contribute to the broader rural economic growth and food system resilience. So, because of the central issues in litigation that led to NAAF's creation involved access to capital for producers, NAAF requires that all applicants incorporate strategies that will improve access to capital for Native farmers and ranchers in their proposed grant activities. Access to capital can be shown by a number of activities. Just a few examples of that include business planning or market planning training, financial education, credit education for students, or record keeping, credit repair activities, different targeted credit application training or technical support, different risk analysis or related activities to ultimately prepare Native farmers and ranchers as they seek capital to support their operations and enterprises. As we know, capital is essential and always needed in agriculture and will always be relevant to those who are involved in food and agriculture. And just as a reminder, our mission is to provide business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy services to those Native farmers and ranchers to promote the continued engagement in agriculture. So next, I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Programs, Chanel Ford.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Whitney. Hi, all. Thank you for joining us today to discuss our 2025 RFA. My name is Chanel Ford. I am the Director of Programs for NAAF, and I grew up on the Spokane Indian Reservation in Wellpinit, Washington. Today, we are going to talk about the 2025 application, who is eligible to apply, the amounts you will be able to apply for. We'll take a dive into the found and application process and share some compliance notes. Our hope is to make a significant impact across as many Native communities as possible. We're excited to share that this year represents the 7th funding cycle for NAAF. So let's get into it. Listed here are our 4 eligible entities that can apply for NAAF funding. We have 501c3s, nonprofit organizations with IRS Section 501c3 tax-exempt status, or if such status has not yet been achieved, such organizations may apply for funding through a fiscal sponsor that has received such 501c3 tax-exempt status, and I'll go into that a little bit later. Educational organizations tribally controlled or bureau-operated schools, as well as schools operated by an Indian tribe or tribal organization. Community Development Financial Institutions, also known as CDFIs, including certified native CDFIs and emerging native CDFIs. Tribes are instrumentalities. An instrumentality of a state or federally recognized tribe, including a nonprofit organization chartered under the tribal law of a state or federally recognized tribe. I would like to note here, if you do apply via tribe, you will need to submit a limited waiver of sovereign immunity with respect to NAAF's right to enforce the terms of the grant. We're going to go into that in depth a little bit later on in the presentation. Next slide. All right, this is important to note if you are, just to ensure accountability and timely reporting, existing grantees who are not in compliance, such as those behind on quarterly, annual, and final reporting and updates relating to past grant awards and projects, will be ineligible to apply for our 2025 funding. We commit to working closely with each grantee who needs help bringing their existing projects into compliance. So if you need to do so, please feel free to reach out to your point of contact if this does apply to you. All right, so here's that fiscal sponsor information. We encourage startup nonprofit organizations that have applied for 501c3 status from the IRS, but who have not received a favorable determination letter, to apply through a fiscal sponsor, who can also provide important technical support for proposed project activities. If fiscal sponsors are used, the fiscal sponsor must be an eligible 501c3 organization and should follow the guidance in NAAF's fiscal sponsor information. Noting here also the relationship between you, the grantee, and the fiscal sponsor is not managed by NAAF. It is not managed by us. It's the sole responsibility of the grantee. So please keep that in mind when you are selecting, if you're choosing the selection of a fiscal sponsor route. Okay. And here we have access to capital. So you heard our CEO share about this, and also Whitney Sawney share about this. So as you may know, this is very, very important, and it was at the core of this Keep Siegel case. Access to capital can be shown by any of the following types of activities. That includes business planning, market planning training, financial education, credit education for scholastic students, record keeping, credit repair activities, targeted credit application training, or technical support. It could also include risk analysis and related activities to prepare your native farmers and ranchers as they seek capital to support their enterprises. There is a conversation on access to capital on our website. There also is information that you can seek in our RFA overview that's also located on the website as well. The applications that don't address access to capital will not be funded in 2025. So just noting that that's a very important piece to the application process. We'll go over more in depth on the weighted score of that piece specifically later on in the presentation. All right, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Program Officer Riley Dizitel to get into the details about how to apply as a 501c3.
Thanks, Chanel. Thanks everybody for joining us today. As Chanel mentioned, my name is Riley Dizitel. I'm an enrolled member of the Colville Confederated Tribes here in Washington State. I also, as she mentioned, I'm a program officer here at NAAF and heavily involved in our RFA process. As she mentioned as well, I'm a program officer, so that means I'm a point of contact for those 501c3 organizations. In this slide, I'm going to review the targeted projects for 501c3 organizations. As a 501c3, you are eligible for a general focus project, the special focus project, and a youth project that I will review later in this presentation. Our general focus project includes business assistance, education, technical support, and/or advocacy services. The project minimum is $100,000 and the maximum funding is $250,000. The available pool for 501c3 organizations is $1 million. An example of a 501c3 general focus project that we funded in the past was providing culturally specific one-on-one business assistance and technical support to native farmers, ranchers, and food producers. Another project that we've funded in the past was focused on fostering sustainable agriculture and economic independence through a seed to market project that included technical ag training and marketing support. for that special focus project in the 2025 RFA is the infrastructure and climate resilience projects. All eligible entities can apply for this category. These projects are meant to focus in land acquisition, construction, transportation, energy development, and/or climate-related issues such as water scarcity, wildfire risks, and related activities. The minimum amount awarded for these projects are $150,000 and the maximum is $500,000, with the available pool also being $1 million. I am turning it over to our program team member, Dr. Joe Graham, to review the educational organization information.
Oatsi, Hopa, Wahinume, Dr. Joe Graham. I'm a person from the Laguna Pueblo over in New Mexico. I'm the point of contact, the POC for the educational organizations. Riley just described the general focus areas. The educational organizations are eligible for that as well. For educational organizations, the total pool is $500,000. The minimum for applications is $75,000. The maximum is $150,000. In addition, the educational organizations are eligible to apply for the special focus areas of infrastructure and climate resilience. The total pool there is $1 million, and the minimum for applications is $150,000. The maximum is $500,000. Okay, some reminders about applications from educational organizations. That NAAF recognizes educational institutions under the broad definition used by IRS Section 170, subsections B, I, A, and lowercase I, and that includes TCUs, tribal colleges and universities, NAASCII institutions. NAASCII is Native American Serving Non-Tribal Institutions, and of course, BIE schools. Universities with FERTEP agents must include FERTEP activities in their applications. NAAF is very interested in engaging BIE schools and their activities in agriculture. So we strongly encourage them to apply. Some examples of educational projects are, we had a tribal college do a horseshoeing school, which after completed allowed a couple of students to be able to start their own businesses. And another tribal college, they leveraged their funding to build a greenhouse, and not only the greenhouse, but the solar voltaic installation that powers that greenhouse. Okay, and so now the slide is about tribes, because I'm also the POC for grants given to tribes. So let me start with these important reminders. Limited waiver of sovereign immunity. That's required for all tribes, but I'm not going to talk about it. Our CEO, Libby, will talk more about that later. And industrial hemp. Since hemp can be a touchy situation in certain jurisdictions, only feasibility studies or market studies would get to the next level for to be considered for approval. Okay, for tribes, the total pool is $1 million. The minimum for applications is $100,000. The maximum is $250,000. In addition, tribes are eligible to apply for the special focus areas described above. Infrastructure and climate resilience, the available pool being 1 million, minimums 150,000, maximum 500,000. Okay, we heard Chanel talk earlier about tribal instrumentalities. And basically, that's just a subgroup of that falls under the purview of a tribe. It can mean a lot of different things. So governments, tribal governments have the latitude to determine which entities are instrumentalities of their government. What we need from those instrumentalities is the proper documentation of their status. And as you see on the slide, the organization must secure and submit an authorizing document from their tribal government to that specific effect. A lot of them have had specific letters of support and sovereignty waivers passed by council. But there may be other methods, and that could be up for discussion. Okay, and some of the projects that tribes have done is we've had a tribe partner with NAAF funding, partner with their own tribe, and they were able to put up 12 miles of new fencing on their ranges. And another tribe was able to install a bison handling facility for their up and coming bison project. So now I'm going to pass it over to our Associate CEO, Libby, to talk more about a sovereign immunity waiver.
Thank you so much, Joe. Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Libby Washburn, and I'm the Associate CEO at NAAF, and I'm also a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation. And I'm here today to talk to you about sovereign immunity waivers. So NAAF is a private charitable trust created by the 2010 settlement of Keep Siegel versus Vilsack. And the final settlement agreement provided for distribution of grants to federal and state recognized tribal governments and their instrumentalities, as we've been talking about earlier. NAAF recognizes that tribes are immune from suit or action as sovereign governments, and that sovereign immunity is vital to the functioning of tribes and all of its subdivisions and bodies. The waiver of a tribe's immunity from suit or action is occasionally required when entering into certain transactions. The court approved the trust agreement that created NAAF, and it contains a specific provision that requires tribal governments to provide a limited waiver of immunity in order to receive NAAF funding. This is the reason that we require this waiver of sovereign immunity. And the requirement stems from NAAF serving as a fiduciary for these trust funds. And we have a duty to protect the funds from fraud and gross mismanagement. So for grant purposes, acceptable waivers of tribal sovereign immunity are limited to the amount of the NAAF grant and the duration of the grant. So if you receive a one-year grant for $100,000, that is what a waiver of sovereign immunity, that is what we would request from you. We wouldn't request anything for a longer amount of time or additional funding. So if a tribe or a tribal entity wants to accept NAAF's grant funding, it must work with the tribe's legal counsel to adopt a waiver of sovereign immunity related to NAAF, and also pass a resolution, create a resolution to be passed by the tribal governing body. So a tribal government and the instrumentality must provide the waiver and resolution within 3 months of being notified that they've received a NAAF grant award. So once we get, you'll be notified whenever you receive the grant award, and then we will immediately reach out to you to start discussing the sovereign immunity waiver. But if you can't do it within 3 months, then we reserve the right to pull the grant back. Also, failure to submit this, so what I just said, sorry, will result in a forfeiture of the award amount. So you've got 3 months to work on this waiver of sovereign immunity and resolution. We do have draft documents, so it is easy to pull this together. Many of you have done this before in the past, and we also have an attorney who works with us who is available to talk to your general counsel, your legal counsel offices. We also ask that the documents be pre-approved. So when you draft them, you send it to us, and then we have our attorney look at it to make sure it's okay. We don't want you to go through any extra steps or spend any time on something that isn't going to meet the requirements of our trust agreement. So it'll save time, and we were able to move them very quickly last year. We are committed to working with you, and can certainly meet with your attorney and kind of upfront try to get this moving before you get too far into the process. Also available to talk more about this when the time is appropriate. So thank you, and I'm going to pass this over to Chanel Ford.
Great. Thank you so much, Libby. I appreciate it. So we're going to dive into the CDFI portion here. So I am the point of contact for the CDFI inbox. If you are a current or past grantee and you are a CDFI, you may have heard from me. Regarding an application via this entity, we hope to see programming that includes loan capital, regranting capital, and technical assistance, business assistance. The available pool we have here is $5.5 million. There is no minimum amount, but we do ask that you do not request the full available pool, which is the $5.5 million. This year's CDFI can also apply for the special emphasis category, which is infrastructure and climate resilience. The available pool, The available pool we have is $1 million. The minimum request is $150,000. The max request is $500,000. I would like to quickly share examples of past funded CDFI projects just to kind of give you an idea of what was funded in the past. So one of our previous CDFIs focused on creating a youth scholarship program, and that supported educational advancement in the native ag field, providing hands-on experiences to build youth's capacity to access capital. Another program project focused on providing technical assistance and deploying affordable loan capital and grants to native agriculture producers on their reservation. If you have any questions regarding CDFI specifically, or any of the eligible entities, you are more than able to email our organization. We can put those in the chat for you as well. But myself, or you have our info@ email, you can send any questions to, but we'll also open up at the end where we can answer your questions live. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it on back over to Riley, and she will discuss our youth programming portion.
Thank you, Chanel. On this slide, we're going to review our youth programming. All eligible entities may apply for a youth project. Please note that the youth application is combined with the general application this year. So if you applied prior to 2024, it will look a little differently. You must select within the 2025 application that you intend to apply for a youth project in order for that section to pop up in the application. Excuse me. The youth project minimum awarded amount is $20,000 and the maximum is $200,000, with the available pool being $1 million. The youth project is due on the same day as our general application, May 1st, 2025. A youth project that we've funded in previous years was focused on empowering tribal gardens by purchasing supplies to promote ag within their youth in the community. They also hosted intertribal agriculture events that shared traditional knowledge from elders in their community. So like I said, the youth project application is in the general application. It is combined and it's all due May 1st, 2025. Thanks all. I'm turning it back over to Chanel.
Awesome. Thank you, Riley. So we're going to dive into our evaluation criteria. So we focus on these specific areas when reviewing applications. I'll go over these in a little more depth, but you can also find this information specifically in the 2025 RFA overview on our website. So we have impact on access to capital. We've shared how access to capital is really important to us here at NAAF. This holds a 25% weight. All applicants will need to identify how and to what extent their project focuses on core access to capital issues of Native farmers and ranchers. We have proposed results outcomes, which holds a 25% weight. When reviewing applications, we'll examine the project approach and we'll look for identified results outcomes of the work. For example, when approaching this area, if you apply as a CDFI, please provide or discuss the amount and number of potential loans or regrants and or technical assistance provided to Native farmers and ranchers. So our CEO explained at the beginning of the presentation that we want to be able to look at this application fully and understand where you're coming from. We don't want to have to raise assumptions. We don't want to have to guess. We want to be able to read it and understand exactly what it is that y'all are applying for, what the impact is, the results, the outcomes y'all will be looking for, etc. So farmer and rancher demand, we have 20% weight. You should discuss the demand for your proposed activities that exist within the farmer and rancher community that you are seeking to serve. You should also describe farmers and ranchers' willingness to participate in the activities proposed and the indicators, if you have any, that reflect interest in the proposed project activities. So how did you gauge that this was a need for your community? We want you to share that. Team organizational capacity and collaborators, that's a 10% weight. We're interested in understanding the skills, knowledge, and experience of the project team and organization that are going to effectively deliver on the project activities as you've proposed. Evaluation holds 10% weight. The effectiveness of the plan for evaluating and tracking farmer and rancher success or participation outcomes or results is required. So we'll examine whether the proposed results are measurable and whether there's a good plan for tracking the proposed results. So please share in depth here. As I said before, we don't want to have to make an assumption. We want to be able to understand exactly what it's going to be looking like when you evaluate the success of your programming. Innovation and replicability is a 10% weight. So NAAF will evaluate the extent to which the project employs innovative approaches to develop or deliver assistance, technical support, education or advocacy services, and the materials or tools to do so. So thinking, is this something that other organizations or communities could potentially utilize? That's what we're thinking when we're reviewing this portion of your application. Next slide. Awesome, thank you. So we'll talk a little bit more about the application review and some of the components. So projects should identify 2 and no more than 5 specific, measurable, realistic, and timely objectives, activities, and milestones for the funded activities and discuss the results or outcomes that are expected. So this is kind of what we're looking for when we're thinking of the outcome results-based projects. Access to capital, again, we've shared quite a bit about this, but in your application, please discuss the impact that your project's going to have on improving access to capital for Native farmers and ranchers. Budget templates. So NAAF provides a budget template and budget guidance for the application. You must use the provided NAAF template when applying for the grant. The budget form and the full RFA are located on our website, and also a budget narrative providing justification of the budget is required for each budget category for which funding is sought. So any questions that are pertain to the budget categories should be reflected on the form and can be posed at any time to NAAF staff. So as I said earlier, we have a dedicated team that will be able to answer your questions live, or if you feel the need to email them, if something comes up later, we have our grants at nativeamericanagriculturefund.org that you could submit the questions to as well, and they will be answered. Grantee convening. So we prefer to meet with all selected grantees in an in-person meeting. We also opt to do virtual meetings as well, but we ask that you include at least $1,000 in your project budget to cover at least one participant, one project staff to attend the grantee meeting. And this will be, the grantee convening is for your class, so your 2025 funded projects. We like to get all the funded projects together for that year and just have a really great convening and allow topics to be discussed, allowed to have breakout sessions and all that good stuff. So resume of key personnel, biographical sketches or short resumes, no more than 3 paragraphs, are required for all key personnel. So this gives us this understanding of who's working on the project, who will be responsible for what tasks or leads on tasks, etc. And then cover letters, applicants must include a cover letter from the senior project official or authorized representative of the organization. And we expect to have that signed and dated. And this specifically discusses the project for which funding is sought. Support letters, they're optional, but we encourage support letters. It gives us, the reviewer, an idea of the relationships that you may have already begun to build with other entities, and also, some thoughts on that you are actively bridging gaps in your region or your communities. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it on over to Lenore Moore, our compliance officer, who will get more in depth on compliance and found it and all of that good stuff.
Thanks, Chanel. Hi, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Lenore Moore. I'm a compliance officer here at NAAF, and I'm a member of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. And so to dive into the application a little bit more, we do want to preface that we're only allowing projects that are 12 or 24 months long. So if you've applied in the past, you may have noticed an 18-month option. But given the feedback we've heard from our grantees, we've decided to only go forward with 12 and 24 months. Please note that all grants retain the flexibility to complete projects ahead of schedule. We just would like them to either stick to their deadline or be completed earlier if possible. And next, we will go into some budget notes. So NAAF's indirect limit is 15%. And so that will be calculated based on the total personnel and direct sums. So any intermediary funds will not go into those calculations. And applicants must follow the budget guidelines and use the required templates that are provided within the application. And they must also abide by the request minimums and maximums that are listed for each category. And next, some critical deadlines. So for the 2025 General and Youth RFA, that deadline will be May 1st, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. And there will be no opportunities to edit or submit the application after that deadline has passed. And so our website that we'll be using is called Found It, and so this is where the application will be hosted. And so if you've applied in the past, you would already have some existing login credentials. But if you are a new applicant or if you do not remember the login from the past application, you're free to create a new account and you can follow the prompts that they will give. And so once that account has been accessed, this will be your applicant dashboard, and you will be able to see your information and any active or historical requests you may have. And so if I can draw your attention to the top left part of the screen, you'll see that icon that says apply. Well, once you click on that, then it will bring up any applications that are available to you. And so it will look just like this screen, except for it will be for 2025. And you will see at the right side of the screen that there is an apply button, and it also tells you that it is accepting submissions from March 1st to May 1st. And that will be reflected on the 2025 dates as well in Found It. And once you click on that apply button, it will take you to this screen, and you'll see that it says application at the top, and it'll still have your information, and you'll be able to scroll through the application and fill it out as you go. You are able to save the application and your progress and come back to it at a later time, but please make sure that you do come back and hit the submit button to make sure your application reaches us.
Okay, great. So now
Perfect. At this time,
now we're going to move into our question and answer period. So this is where we encourage you to submit your questions to the question box, or feel free to also include your questions in the chat feature. We've been answering some questions that have been submitted as we go along, but I'm going to go ahead and spotlight our our Director of Programs, Chanel Ford, and we will get those answered. And we're also going to repeat some of the questions because other folks may have similar questions. So we'll do our best to make sure we get through all of those. So Chanel, one of the first questions was, can you apply for the general focus and the special focus funding?
Yes, so you are able to apply for general focus and special focus. I know that there was kind of another question that I just had answered about, do we expect you to include the special emphasis categories in your general application? We do not. These are two separate applications. So if you choose to apply for our general application and you also want to submit an application for the special emphasis, which is the climate resilience and infrastructure, you can do that. You do not have to include climate resilience infrastructure in your general application. We only ask that you do that if you're specifically applying for that special emphasis category.
Great, thank you, Chanel. And then kind of follow up to that question. So if an organization is submitting both a general and a youth application, how is that done technically? Is it done within one application? Since last year and previous years, we've had a separate youth and general application.
Yeah, so when you go through the Fountain application, you will be able to see that our application is housed in one location, and it will give you the opportunity to select if you would like to apply for general, and if you would like to apply for youth, if you would like to apply for the special emphasis. So once I do encourage y'all to go look at the application, go on to our website and look at the application just to get a feel for it, but it will allow you to kind of toggle down and select which application you're applying for, or if you're applying for both. And then it will allow you to submit all of your information in sort of this one setting. Now, just to clarify, your budgets, your information, your projects do have to be separate. So if you're applying for you're focusing on doing creating a bison ranch and you want to be able to increase access to capital, and you talk about all that and you apply for our general and you put in maybe a youth application, those cannot mirror each other. So if you're putting in multiple applications, they do have to be standalone projects and they cannot be identical projects. We have seen that in the past, so we just want to clarify, if you are submitting multiple applications, that they are different separate applications, meaning that they're not copy and pasted.
Great, thank you, Chanel. And just as a reminder to folks, you can download a Word version or PDF version of the application before you go into our Foundit system to create an account and then start a draft of the application itself. All of those documents are on our website. So I'm going to share for a moment what their website looks like and just do a quick run through so you can see what's available to you in terms of what kind of documents are on that web page and other resources as well. So I'm going to share my screen. And if you guys can see this okay. So you'll see the very introduction. It's more of an overview document where you can have essentially all of what we talked about today in our webinar. You can download this document. It is, I believe it is 24 pages, but don't be overwhelmed. You can use this table of contents to help navigate through maybe specific questions, if it's specific to access to capital or information about indirect costs or allowable use of funds. Feel free to use this as your starting resource. Additionally, when you go back into this page, you can preview all of the questions in the application, both from the general and youth question list, and that is available again through PDF that you can download ahead of time. As you scroll through, you will see again that list for questions, but also the link to apply to the Foundant, which is what you heard Lenora speak to at the end of our presentation earlier. And then you will see all of our deadlines, our contact information, as well as just a checklist, right? You can go up here, you can say, what do I need before I get started? It gives you all the required documents that are going to be asked for as we go along, all the downloads, so that overview document I spoke to, but also our budget templates, different budget guidelines, sample budgets, budget narrative, even our frequently asked questions, which you can also see here towards the bottom. We have video tutorials. If you're filling out our questions about the financial pieces of this, these are really helpful resources and a tutorial series. And the frequently asked questions, I believe we also add questions after each webinar. So if you don't see your question on here, you can always reach out to our team at the grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org email address, and we'll get back to you. So that's just a quick run through of how to utilize this resource here. And hopefully if your question's not answered, you can try to also use our new feature this year, which is our chatbot feature. And you can try to get those questions answered quickly. But again, we are here to support you as we go throughout this open grant period. So Chanel, I'm going to now turn over to you with another question. One of the questions here was about examples for how to incorporate access to capital for a youth grant. What are some ways that we can engage access to capital for youth?
I'm sorry, Whitney, I'm going back up to that question. Whitney did a great job of answering this question. So number of ways to support youth to increase access to capital. Some examples in the past include grant project that included youth ambassadors and revitalizing traditional food systems in Northern California. Through social enterprises, Acorn Bites, they trained youth on how to steward, collect, and process the acorns and strengthen their business development knowledge, creating pathways for career in the ag space. Other examples include financial education. We've had a lot of youth projects focus on financial education, focusing on ag for students. We've had grantees apply, and via it was an education organization applying for youth, and that was specific to teach their youth how to harvest, I believe, sheep, and how to take care of them from start to finish, and then how to essentially take what they harvest and put it to market. So there's a lot of ways that we've seen some really good, increasing access to capital within our youth projects. But as Whitney shared here, all of our past grantees are on our website. You just click on the year and it will pop up and it will show you what we funded in the past.
Thank you, Chanel. Another question that came in about our special focus areas as relates to infrastructure and climate resilience. Can you just speak to that a little bit more and how that should be addressed in the special emphasis application?
Yeah, so I see that Jeff had a question specifically in regard to the addressing the weighted categories, but if this isn't addressing climate resilience. So if you're applying for the climate resilience category, that's going to be separate than the general application. So we want to know what does that look like in your community? What does that look like for your organization? How are you addressing climate resilience and infrastructure? And we've had grantees in the past when focusing on infrastructure, it looks like they needed to equip their cattle ranches with new fencing. They needed to help the soil growth, so they needed to shift the movement and the patterns of their cattle. And so thinking of it from that perspective, if you're focusing on special emphasis, then that project is going to be in the special emphasis category. So whatever you're submitting will be in the special emphasis category, and we're going to score you based off of the same 6 criteria pieces, but it's going to be the special emphasis topic. So it will have to include infrastructure and climate resilience. If you apply for the general application, it does not have to include infrastructure. Your project does not have to include infrastructure or climate resilience.
Thank you for clarifying that, Chanel. And just an additional context too, if you're wondering about infrastructure and climate resilience and what that could look like, that could be addressing climate-related issues such as unpredictable weather, water scarcity, increased wildfire risks that may threaten food production, overall agricultural sustainability, and in the space of infrastructure, looking at things like construction, transportation, Chanel had mentioned like irrigation or fencing, energy development, different logistics or storage, or other related activities for infrastructure as well.
I do see a question on here, Whitney. Somebody's asking, can a grantee provide funds or small grants without being a financial institution, or is that just for CDFI? So our nonprofit organizations often will utilize their funding to go back out into grant form to producers, straight to producers. We've had youth projects focus on that as well. So if you're applying by way of nonprofit organization, you could potentially distribute funding back out in forms of a small grant.
Great, thank you, Chanel. And just as a reminder for folks, we did receive some questions about whether or not this webinar or this slide deck will be accessible at a later time. Yes, absolutely, it will be. We'll follow up with an email after this webinar. But in addition to that, we will post on the webpage I was just sharing with you. You'll find it at the bottom of that webpage. Or always feel free again to reach out to our grants at nativeamericanagriculturefund.org email address as well. So a couple of other questions that came in. Chanel, can a grantee provide startup funds? Oh, I'm sorry. I think you may have actually already addressed that one. I apologize. Forgive me. So a grantee or potential applicant is talking about a single project model, but in different communities with different unique needs. Can they apply for those communities under different categories?
I'm looking for that question, Whitney, so I can reread it. Where is it?
Sure thing. So it says we have a single project model, but in different communities with different unique needs. Can we apply for those communities under different categories?
I'm so sorry. I just want to make sure that I'm answering it right. Is it an open question or already answered question?
Open question, yes.
Oh, open question. Sorry. I'm in the wrong area. Okay, we have a single project model, but in different communities with different unique needs. Can we apply for those communities under different categories? So I guess it would just have to be, can you apply for those communities under different categories? So if I'm understanding this question correctly, you would want to apply for separate grant projects for multiple communities. If you're applying via a fiscal sponsor, or if you're a grant writer, or if you're applying for these entities and you want, so like, say for example, there's two local reservations that are bordering where I'm at, and you were writing the grant project for them and knew that they could benefit from this project model. They're kind of similar in ag. You could apply for both of those communities. Yes, you could apply for two separate applications. Yes. But like I said before, if you're applying for projects, multiple projects, just make sure that they are not identical projects. So you can apply for those communities under a different category. So I'm assuming maybe it would be like a youth project and maybe it would be a general project. Or maybe it's two general projects. I guess maybe if you could follow up with that and answer if are you wanting to apply separately for multiple entities? And then I'll circle back to that.
Awesome. And then we had one more question come through from a nonprofit Native Hawaiian organization asking if they would need to submit a sovereign waiver agreement. But if you're applying as a 501c3, that does not require a submission of a separate sovereign waiver agreement. All right.
I see that there's a question. Can you clarify if Native Hawaiian farmers are included? Yes, we include applicants that are sending project applications from Hawaii. We have funded a few grantees multiple grantees in the past from Hawaii. So yes, you are included in being able to apply for our NAAF funds.
Yes. And one additional question is, can a grant project provide scholarships for Native youth to attend different agricultural training or attend agricultural focused education at a tribal college or university? Chanel, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, I think that would be a great way to utilize funds. We've had some grantees do that in the past, increasing access to capital, increasing ag education, encouraging agribusiness. That would potentially be something we would allow to be funded.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's see. I'm making sure we're not missing any other questions here. We've had a number come through. All right. So can a grantee provide, I'm sorry, I keep reading the wrong, same one. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. I'll just click done because I answered that one live.
Um, so I think maybe we've actually gone through a number of these already.
I think this longer one, I would like to take some time to look at it from David, and then we could send a follow-up. It's asking about um, potential project, like actual info on a project. So if we could get back to you, David, I'd like to look at this in more depth and provide a response. So also now that we're in the open period, NAAF staff, we are not allowed to directly say, give you specific tips on absolutely this is something we will fund because of X, Y, and Z, but we can look at your project and see, are these some things that we've funded in the past that are similar? We can kind of give you the guiding information that you would need to see that this programming is right for you to apply for. So I'll look at that in more depth if that's okay, David.
Chanel, can you also remind our returning grantees of our, I know we mentioned it in our presentation, but some of our new compliance changes this year, like the duration of the grants that's available and so on.
Yeah, so I think Lenora answered that question. I want to get down to that really quickly. So grant projects, we allowed one budget modification per year. So if you're a returning grantee, that's different than the past. We allowed multiple modifications, but now we're sticking with one modification per year. 12-month projects will only be allowed one budget modification through the life of the grant. And then if you're a 2-year grant, if you're a 24-month project, you are allowed two. So it's really important if you get funded, you will have a point of contact. So I'm a point of contact for the CDFI inbox. I have Dr. Joe Graham, who's the point of contact for tribes and edu-orgs. And then we have Riley Dizitel, who is the point of contact for 501c3s. So what we encourage is to be in complete contact with your point of contact, just to ensure that if there's any hiccups that you might experience, or if you're seeing, hey, this project isn't going how we thought we need to pivot. It's good to be in contact with your POC so that they can help you adjust and fill out that budget modification correctly. Or maybe we might have some ideas where you can shift and you don't have to do a formal budget modification yet, so keeping that in mind. If you do receive funding from us, you will have somebody that's available to assist you. And then our compliance team is fantastic. They're the ones who will review the modification requests that come through. So just know that if you are funded, this is something that will help walk you through and make sure that you're guided if you're wanting to do a modification in any way.
Great, thank you, Chanel.
And then I see the one about, I'm applying with an organization with charitable status. Do we need a fiscal sponsor? And Dr. Joe Graham says, if by charitable status you mean it's a nonprofit, you would need a fiscal sponsor. If you don't have the capacity to do what is required to handle you would need a fiscal sponsor if you don't have the capacity to do what is required to handle granted resources. If you do have the capacity, you wouldn't need a fiscal sponsor. You'll have a chance to demonstrate that ability in your application. So if you are applying via a fiscal sponsor, and you're not a 501c3 yet, maybe you're working to establish your 501c3, you're in the process of getting your determination letter, you can apply still via a fiscal sponsor. But what that means is you have to actively be in the steps to getting your 501c3 status. So we will allow a year if you apply through a fiscal sponsor who already has that status. We will allow you a year to receive that 501c3 status while under your fiscal sponsor, but you need to be actively attempting to become a 501c3. So just wanted to clarify that as well.
Thank you, Chanel. We also had a question come in about whether some grant project requests will be partially funded or funded to the full amount. And I can speak to this one here. Short answer, yes, some have in the past been partially funded, but what we do is we reach out to you and we talk about the process and ensure that you're still able to accomplish your project goals and objectives, and decide if you want to do that and move through that process, and how you would modify your project to align with partial funds.
Awesome. We've got a lot of great questions. And just a note too, you're more than welcome to submit any further questions you have or more in-depth questions to our grants at email. I will go through those questions with our other staff, Jess Morago, and we'll do our best to answer them. I want to flag to you want to get all of your questions out, especially when you start going through the application process. Don't wait until the last minute to ask your questions. If it's day of and it's, I think our application closes at 11:59 Central Time, if I'm not mistaken. If you have questions, make sure that those questions are asked before the day of closing, just so that we can get you the best answer and make sure that you're staying on track in submitting your application. Also, do not forget when you're going through the application process to click submit on your application. We've had some grantees, some applicants that have gone through, and I saw that there was a question about multiple people, a third party applying. Whoever is applying via your organization, that's fine. We don't control who has access to it. That's all on the applicant. You could have another individual, if you have a grant writer, you're contracting and they're submitting the application, that's totally fine. Just make sure that whoever is submitting your application clicks the submit button.
So we did have a clarification come through as it relates to the question about serving multiple communities. So if that program is serving multiple communities, they have a tailored project to address their community needs, but it's the same but has separate budgets and designed to meet unique community needs, such as focus on engaging youth or building fences for community farmers. The question is if they can apply to separate categories based on the community need.
Yep.
So
That would be allowable, just so long as, like I said, the projects are completely different. We are this year, every year is a pretty competitive process. So just make sure when you're sending your application through that it really makes sense. What makes the most sense for your community, and are you in the right category for applying? But yeah, so if you wanted to do the infrastructure and you also had the general application, totally fine. You wanted to have a youth component. We've seen organizations, my tribe had submitted 2 applications, one for a nonprofit, one that would be communicating with their nonprofit, one that would be communicating with their business side of things. So absolutely fine to do that. Like I said, as long as the applications don't mirror each other and they're not identical, that's fine.
awesome. And then we had one question we had mentioned earlier in our presentation about allocating funding for an in-person grantee convening. So one question here is, what is expected from the grantee during that in-person grantee convening? Or if this is specifically a question about what a grantee site visit might look like, those grantee site visits are not required, but that is something that we do like to do. Oftentimes our staff are either attending or a different conference, or we're in your region, so we'd love to connect with you and learn about the work that you're doing. So during those visits, it's more as using us as a resource so we can walk through any questions you have about your grant projects. We'll have a member of our program staff with us, as well as our communications team. And during that visit, we'd love to even just highlight some of the stories and of the producers you're working with and the projects they're working on. And so really those are more informal meetings, but our grantee convening, every other year we aim to have that in person, depending on what's going to be available and easy for folks to travel. We try to really pick central locations intentionally. But for that, you would allocate the $1,000 in your budget for the airfare to attend that. And that's more of a 1 to 2 day a gathering so you can collaborate with other grantees and talk about projects where maybe you overlap or can support or learn from one another. Additionally, we have different panelists come and speak and provide educational opportunities, how to improve grant writing, how to be a good steward of grant funding, just all of the wide variety of topics, and we'd be happy to share more in detail about that if you have any other follow-up questions.
I see a question come in about, it says, you mentioned it's a very competitive process. How many applications did you receive versus the number of funded last year in the past? I can't think off the top of my head how many applicants we received. We do have, is it 35 projects that were funded in 2024, I believe, 34 projects. So basically it's also, I don't want anybody to think that it's so crazy that you have a low chance of getting funded or anything like that. I just meant that when you're submitting your application, make sure that it fits the entity or the umbrella of which you're applying, because as you've seen in the presentation, we have specific caps for different categories, right? So there's $10 million total that we're giving out in terms of funding. However, that looks different for CDFI. The max amount that will relieve for CDFIs is 5.5 million. And then when you go back to the tribes and the 501c3s, that's 1 million. So that amount is what we can give out. And if you look at the max and the mins, it might be different. We might give out 4. It just depends on kind of how everything will shake out in the end. But we do try to fully fund the projects that we get. If we have excess, we'll try to shape it out to see, what projects, if we can make some projects work that have less funding, et cetera. So last year, like I said, I believe we had 34 projects that we did fund. I see a question. As mentioned at RES, we are looking at the possibility of applying. I believe we will work with waiving our sovereign immunity for funds received. Would our executive director being on the board of NAAF be an issue?
So that is a great question. We do have a conflict of interest requirement for our trustee members that are on our board. So we will follow up with this question specific to your organization, but I do believe, unfortunately, that that would raise a potential conflict of interest. So we'll come back to you and we'll reach out to you individually. Thank you so much for that question.
I do see the question there about clarifying the Native Hawaiian farmers, Pacific Islanders. So if you're in the state of Hawaii, that would be, if I'm not mistaken, Whitney, if you're in the state of Hawaii and you're identifying as Native Hawaiian, we would potentially fund that. I guess if you're like in Samoa or if you're in another region, we would not fund that. So I guess I don't know specifically about the question on like region, if you're asking about region or Pacific Islanders identifying basically as Hawaiian, if that makes sense. Will there be a grant convening this year? I believe this year for 2025, we will have a grantee convening for our 2024 grantees that will be held virtually. And the 2025 grantee cohorts that get funding this year would then be 2026. So you would do I believe we were shooting to have that 2026 grantee convening in person. Fingers crossed that we make that happen. But this year's grantee convening is for the 2024 funded applicants, and that will be virtual. Northern Shores Community Development would love for NAAF to come to a site visit so we can share with you what we have been doing in our community with the NAAF grant program. Yes, we've talked about that. That's on Whitney and I's list. you're in our region to go visit. So I'll definitely be reaching out, and we'll be setting that up hopefully in the near future.
I do have a question about purchasing land as an allowable cost. Will purchasing land and or property, is that allowable?
Do we still have Libby on the phone or on the phone on the on the Zoom? She might be able to answer that better than I.
I am. So we have allowed it in very slim circumstances in the past. I think we would have to look at the circumstances. It's not something that we normally fund every year in the RFA, but if you were very specific about what exactly you were hoping to purchase and how much it was going to cost and what the use would be, this is something that I think that we would consider in an application, but just know that it's not normally what we do. Land is expensive, and what we have had happen is we've given somebody money and then they are unable to purchase what they were hoping to purchase for the certain price, or it sells and then they don't have the money that they need to make an additional purchase. So I think am I remembering this correctly, Chanel and Whitney? We have seen this before, but I think it's only been just very seldom, maybe once or twice.
Yeah.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you, Libby. And I just want to remind folks that we will again be providing this recording and as well as a slide deck on our webpage, which I've dropped in the chat box here, but it's if you just go to nativeamericanagriculturefunds.org, it's right at the top of the page. At the header, it says 2025 request for applications. You'll find it there, as well as we'll follow up with an email that has a link to this recording within about 48 hours. So that being said, if you have any questions or if something was not addressed in this question and answer period, or we've actually directly said that we need to follow up with you in a specific response, we have your information. So we will respond to you via our grants at inbox.
I definitely want to note too, Whitney, flag the question, the Native Hawaiian eligibility. We'll definitely respond back to you just to give specific feedback on that question.
And additionally, we'll post that question to our frequently asked questions on our webpage as well. Okay, great. So I'm starting to see some of the questions slow down. Making sure I know we've been answering some of these in response via messaging here in this chat bot, but I just want to also make sure if other folks might have a similar question that we can answer those live.
I see a question regarding audited financials. I might have Libby speak to that too, but it says we're a 501c3 who hasn't met the audit requirement. Without audited financials, will we still be eligible? I believe at the time of application, if you don't have audited financials, it's okay. However, we ask that you provide the audited financials within a specific period of time. Libby, you can share more if that's not correct.
Yes, I mean, it is very quickly that we do need it. If you don't have it at the time of application, you would need to have it by the time that we're considering the application. We have allowed it to go for a longer period of time in the past, and then it just draws out, into a year. And so we just can't do that anymore. But, if you apply at the end of this month, you would have a little bit of grace period to get it in, but we would need it by the time we actually started to contemplate the application.
And I see that the question of if there are no funds to audit a new nonprofit, then that's different. And I answered that question earlier. As long as you're as long as you inform us and there's information in the application to inform that you are a new startup, you're technically still eligible to apply. So if we know that this is a brand new organization, this is a new startup, we have that, we understand that you're just getting off the ground. This might be your first cycle of funding. This might be your second cycle of funding. And so we're understanding of that. That might put you in a different category of somebody who has been a current and active nonprofit organization that, in other words, would have that sort of documentation already. Got it. Okay. And you'll be able to put that in the application. There's drop down boxes for that specific information where you can explain that. And we do specifically have a finance team that will review review the audit information, they'll review the financing section, they'll review all of that, 501c3 determination, things like that. So we'll be able to tell kind of what we're working with when we see what you've marked in your application. Is there a rule of thumb for the number of people the projects should serve or affect? Actually, we don't really necessarily have a rule of thumb here. We understand that it might look different for you all to, it might look different in each community, right? So somewhere that if you're in a smaller community or a rural community and you're increasing access to capital for 8 farmers or ranchers or producers, 8 is a lot in that community, and we are understanding of that. There might be a suburban area that's servicing 108 people or 180 people. We understand that it looks different. The impact will look different. So even if it's a smaller number, we just want you to express why the impact of that is so important, why that number is so important, and what does that look like in terms of it impacting the broader community or trickling outside of the community into the region. So just make sure when you're going through your application, you're expressing that and you're sharing, like, 6 people might not seem like a lot, 16 people might not seem like a lot, but in this region, in this community, it is because, and then express why, because it's bringing produce to our community who has to travel 2 hours otherwise to get fresh produce or whatever it may be. But we understand that it looks different in different regions, and it can fluctuate. So just express, give us a full picture of what that looks like.
Hey, do we have any other questions that are coming through? Don't believe we do. But this is not your last opportunity to ask us questions. As we've been mentioning throughout this webinar, please feel free to reach out to our team at grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. We've provided that email address in the chat. But additionally, we'll have more of these webinars. So just so you know, the first part the presentation will be the same, but we'll have this live question and answer period. So if you feel like you can start your grant application and you get into it and you're like, okay, maybe I have another clarifying question on eligibility, you can join there, or again, you can call us or email us. So we're here to help support you.
Yeah, thank you all for attending today. We had a great turnout for the first webinar. This is exciting.
Awesome. Okay, good. And yeah, I also want to give a thank you for those comments and appreciation for the support documents that are provided on the website. I'm going to give a big shout out to Chanel and her programs team, and you've heard from a number of them on here, as well as the compliance team. They do a lot of work to ensure that all these resources are available to you all. And again, if there's a unique situation that comes up for you, let's get that answered, and we'll make sure that we include that in the future. But again, thank you all so much for utilizing those resources. And I think we have most of the questions answered. Chanel, am I missing any?
think so. I think we are golden. And then, as Whitney said, this will be shared on our website too. And we have located on our website frequently asked questions that you have access to also. But we're more than happy to answer your questions via email as you're going through the application. Like I said, pop in there, take a look at it. If you have any questions about the application itself, we have a great team, a great support system to help walk you through anything that you might need. So don't hesitate to reach out. And like I said, the earlier the better. I used to write grants too. I know how sometimes it gets down to the nitty gritty, but just making sure that we're here, we're available, you have resources, and we're happy to help. Happy to help you get through this application process.
Wonderful. Okay. So I think what we're going to do now is our staff and our team will be on for 5 more minutes. We're just going to leave this open. So feel free to log off if you've had your questions answered. Really can kind of consider this the end of the webinar, but we're here just in case, any last minute questions come through, and we'll answer those as we go along. But thank you again for your attendance today. We really appreciate your time.
Cool. I love all the little emojis that are popping up. That's so fun.
Thank you all so much. And again, this is all because of the work that you do. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. I'm not seeing any thumbs down, so that's that's a good sign for us.
Okay, great. So we'll be here for about 4 more minutes. Thank you all so much. I do have a hand raised here. One question. So I think we can go ahead and allow for this question to be asked. So I'm going to allow to talk. Nope, they might have went away. LaShawn, were you one of the questions? Or maybe not. Maybe there was an accident and meant to do an emoji reaction. Oh,
There's a question about what's the timing between submitting application and needing to submit audited financials. Can we include the funding in the grant to cover the costs of the audit? I'm not sure about that. I don't know if Libby's still on here. We might have to circle back. I'm not sure specifically about using funds in the grant to cover the cost of the audit. I'm not certain about that. But so if you were to submit the application by the deadline, we go through a process of, so the application closes May 1st. We would ask that you can use last year's financials or previous year's financials. That's okay. We'll take that and accept that. And then we'll just ask you, what does it look like for the most recent audited financials that you have. That timeline is kind of really based on our team and how we move through the process of funding. So if you're a selected applicant, I believe it's only like a month or two, I can't remember, after we go through the process, our financial team or audit team will look at all of your documents and reach out and say, we need X, Y, and Z, or we need this, and this. I want to say it's like 2 months. I can't be sure. We can ask Kathy on that just to get a for sure answer and get back to you.
we did have a question come about, is if agricultural technology supported, such as greenhouses, aquaponics, and growing pods. Yes, that would be an eligible project. We've had a number of grantees build greenhouses. We just visited one of our grantees out in North Dakota that is creating this net zero greenhouse, and it's becoming this great hub and resource for not only the students, but the producers in the area as well. So that would be eligible. One other question came through about an example of what can be included in a cover letter.
Do you want to talk about that, Whitney?
Yeah, sure. So I think that varies. Really, I think what we're looking for is ultimately a question that says how your project is going to address access to capital or any other background context to maybe introduction to your organization. There are questions throughout the application that ask about maybe specific how you intend to access capital, increase access to capital, but just I think a general overview of the impact you're looking to make with your grant project and an introduction to who you are as an organization. That really helps set the stage for a lot of our reviewers in the process, because as Chanel and a number of our team have mentioned, don't assume that the grant reviewer will know everything about where you're coming from and where you are. And like my work agriculture and where I'm from, it looks very different from where Chanel is from. So I'm more familiar, for example, with ag in Oklahoma. Chanel will be more familiar with agriculture in the Pacific Northwest. So and it's not always guaranteed that the person reviewing your application will be from the area, but they want to ensure that they have the best context and the background information possible to score your application. So that's really what we're looking for in that sense. We did have another question come through about whether or not funds could be used to start a school garden. Yes, it could be, as long as you're also incorporating maybe that financial education or that access to capital for youth, maybe creating career pathways, or maybe, sorry, that was not a specific question to, or it was actually for youth, for schools. So as long as you're creating pathways for agricultural careers or understanding, just having that additional piece to support that school garden, that would be great.
I just chatted Kathy too to see if I could get a quick answer from her on the financials. So waiting for her to shoot me a message back, but we could also follow up. I know that this attendee is anonymous, so if you were willing to shoot us your email, we could get that answer about the we are a 501c3 hasn't met the audit requirement without audit, or no, where did that go? At the bottom, I think. Oh, what's the timing between submitted application and needing to submit audited financials? That question. I'm trying to grab an answer right now, but we can also follow up.
Another question about is if photos and media about programs in the area can be included in the grant application or uploaded. Chanel, I want to see, or Riley, I think they can upload via PDF. Is that correct? So it could be like screenshots. And is there a place to put links in there? I might let you all speak to that.
In the application, for the financial information, is that the question you're asking? Just
If they're just looking to tell about their programs and want to share more, like some like video summaries of their grants and what they're looking to. So
Yeah,
like,
definitely. At the bottom of the application, there is a section that says optional uploads. That's where you can submit your support letters. And then there's actually space that is just extra space to include graphics, pictures, additional support letters, anything in that capacity. And that is a PDF file upload. But also there's a text box in there as well.
okay, great. Okay, so making sure I didn't miss it. What we're going to do is we're going to review these questions that were submitted. If we did happen to miss one that came through, our team's going to respond to you via email. I believe were able to share that when you registered for this webinar. But with that, I think we're slowing down on questions, so we may go ahead and close out the webinar for today. But thank you so much to you for attending and for your time. And thank you to the NAAF team for your time today as well.
Thank you all.